Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of r/Entitled Parents. In today's episode, entitled Dad breaks my leg because I continuously blocked his son from scoring. EM and son demand $12,000 from my dad. Not buying a handheld game for her kids after was told not. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. Entitled Dad breaks my leg because I continuously blocked his son from scoring. We had a volleyball tournament. For reference, I'm a middle blocker, 6 feet 5 inches, and a vert of 70 centimeters. Game starts and everything goes good. Eventually entitled Dad's kid gets subbed in because his team wasn't scoring, and apparently he's a star player. I blocked every hit he went for and his dad started to get visibly angry, starting to shout at me and stuff as well. After the game ended, we won and I blocked nearly every shot from this guy. The entitled dad came to me asking what my problem is and stuff. I said, "Sorry man, it's my job." He started laughing and stomped on my shin. It's broken and I'm currently in hospital writing this story, and the dad should hopefully end up in jail. Also planning on suing for permanent damages. Doctor says I may not be able to play volleyball ever again, and I got a college offer. Definitely press charges. Which country is this in, by the way? Also, wow, when I read the title I thought this was hockey or rugby or some other form of contact sport, but volleyball? That makes the dad doubly insane. I just feel sad for his kid. Hope he doesn't turn out the same. And I hope fervently that you regain full control and strength in your leg as soon as possible. Australia, I got accepted to a US college because I play really well, so depressing. I believe it's Australia, based off OP's history. But yeah, press charges absolutely. I'd figure out the cost of a 4-year degree and make him pay that full ride scholarship. I hope I can get that. Problem is that it also robs the guy of the expiry CE of being a 6 feet 5 inches Australian college athlete in the US. Dude would be pulling that much more tail if he was on the university team, and that is priceless. Sounds like grievous bodily harm. If in Queensland, maximum penalty is 14 years or life in prison, depending on if it is proven to be an intentional act. Police will be keen to hear from you. You can get a tax-free recognition payment from the government. Basically a grant because you were a victim. If you win in court, you must repay this. They can also pay for physio and counseling. Best of luck. I'm not a lawyer. I've been through this myself. In New South Wales. Hope the outcome can be the same. To stomp on someone's legs, I'm assuming OP was sitting on ground with enough force that the bone breaks, is definitely intentional. I think you should press charges and sue the bastard. Hopefully you'll get better soon. Definitely looking into my options. Aside from obvious violence and stupidity. Wow, what a crap dad. When someone annoys you by taking victory from you, the right answer is to assault them and get revenge. Hope he's gonna pay for your whole scholarship so that the son gets to learn how far consequences can go. It's depressing because I had a future doing what I liked. I really hope I break all odds and recover to play. I really hope. EM and son demand $12,000 from my dad. Okay, so I've followed this subreddit for a long time now, and I've also enjoyed listening to Reddit stories over on YouTube, so I feel it's time I shared one of my stories here. This is going to be long, so please bear with me. I'll begin by saying that I, 25M, come from a very well-known West African country, and I come from one of the 3 major ethnic groups in my country. My country has a lot of oil, and my father, 64M, is an engineer and worked for a very big oil company here before he retired a few years ago. He's the second of 3 children. Due to his job, salary and position within the company, he became the entire family's breadwinner. His elder brother had 7 children with his wife, and his younger brother had 2 children with his late wife, and my father trained each and every one of them. He sent them all to school through their nursery to primary and secondary schools, and when they all graduated from high school, he gave each of them the option of either going to a higher institution or helping them start up a business of their own. Every Christmas, we'd travel to the village and he'd buy multiple 50 kilograms bags of rice, bags of beans, tons of groceries, specially dried fishes, and so much more, and he'd distribute this to the entire family, aunts, uncles, etc. He catered for his siblings, cousins, old friends in the village as well as their respective families so much, and it sometimes offended my mother because while he took excellent care of us and she was never against him helping his siblings out, she felt he was making them overly dependent on him. He opened a thriving business for his elder brother's wife and stocked up her business with all the necessary wares, and he did the same for his younger brother, and yet whenever they had a problem, they'd choose to call him instead of solving even the most basic problems by themselves. This is all preamble to show you that he really cared for his family. This involves my father's elder brother's wife we'd call Rita and her eldest son we'd call Chris. Rita is a woman in her 50s and Chris is in his mid-30s. When Chris was born, his mother despised him because given our tradition and culture, she felt like his pregnancy forced her into a marriage she did not want, so she took out her frustration on him. When he was 11, my mother was a newlywed, and on one of her trips accompanying my dad to the village, she saw how Rita physically abused her own son, which is pretty common here under the guise of discipline, and out of fear for his safety, my parents asked his father to let them take Chris with them back to the city so they could in a sense foster him as their own to remove him from that abusive environment. I was barely a year old at this point. Chris lived with us for roughly 18 years. He got a good education, and when it was time to go to the university, he had a lot of problems gaining an admission. In my country, all the universities, both state and federal, are under an organization and everyone takes an annual national exam based on your intended course of study, and those who do the best are admitted into their institution of choice. He'd taken this exam for about 6 years, and each time he'd fallen short and hadn't received an admission, so my dad gave him the option to continue trying or to put it on hold and learn a good trade for about a year, and after that, he'd open a business for him and maybe he could try getting into the university later on if he still wanted. He chose the latter option, and he was sent off to another city to stay with a family friend who taught him all he needed to know about the given business for free, and after a year, he returned back home. My father gave him what is equivalent to $12,000 to begin a business. Over here, $12,000 is a very big chunk of money, especially with the low cost of living here compared to our Western counterparts, and also especially how lax our tax laws are here. My dad offered him a check for that amount and he refused it, saying how small the money was. My dad had already found a really good space for him to run his business and had paid and rented it out for 2 years for him, as well as paying his water and electric bills. The $12,000 was an initial capital for him to stock up on his wares without having to worry about rent or any critical expenses for 2 years at least. All he had to do was simply make sales and bring in profit so that after 2 years, he could afford to take on the expenses on his own, because he probably would have saved quite a bit of money in that time, and even if he did have difficulties, knowing my dad, he would have jumped in to help. However, Chris rejected the money, saying how small it was and he was expecting at least $17,000. That although the space my dad had rented for him was in a prime location, that it was too small for him and that he had found a much bigger space a few blocks away, and he expected my dad to pay for that as well. He said he had big ideas and didn't want my dad to repress his ideas, so he needed the appropriate support. My mother just about lost her head hearing this and chastised him about how ungrateful he was being. She asked him how many people were willing to do the things my dad had done for him. She asked him why he couldn't use this fund as an initial capital and begin his business and strive to make it successful so that he could afford to move into that bigger space after the 2 years lease was up. He got upset and called his mother, with whom relations had improved significantly over the years, and she tore my dad a new one. She screamed in our native language about how, after the stress he must have been under by not getting into the university, the least you can do is make sure this dream of his is nurtured fully. Why are you being in a Akanchi, which means stingy in my language? You have the money, so just do as he asks in the way that he asks. If you died today, would they bury you with your money? You are not setting a good example as his uncle. Tofi Aqua. Which basically means God forbid. My father did not respond and promptly ended the call. Later on, his dad, my father's brother, called him and I don't know what was said, but after that, he came and picked up the check where he'd previously dropped it and muttered a half-ass thank you before leaving. My dad also received a call from his brother apologizing for his behavior. Fast forward 2 years, and this was now 2016. I was 18/19 and my immediate younger sister, 12F, was now in secondary school and my other siblings were also in primary school, so the financial burden on my dad was quite a lot during this time, so he called Chris and had a talk with him. This was sometime in October and my dad said that since Chris's business was going well, that perhaps it was time for him to move out from our home maybe by the new year so that the financial constraints could be alleviated a bit. Now, mind you, Chris had lived with us for 18 years since I was barely a year old and he was 11/12 years old, and now I was 18/19 years old, so he was about 29/30 years old now. He never paid rent for one day or paid for utilities. My dad always did. He never bought his own food or groceries either. My dad did that too for almost 2 decades he lived with us. When my dad asked him to move out, he said nothing and, like before, called his mother. I have no idea what was said, but she called my dad in a fury that evening, screaming her head off about how my dad has never really cared about her son's success, and brought up the $12,000 incident from a few years earlier. She said something along the lines of, "You want him to leave your house while your wife's sister is still living with you. This is how little you care about your brother and his family. My son doesn't need you or your charity. My God will help him to survive with or without you," and so on. The wife's sister she referred to was a young niece of my mom's who had lost her parents to militant actions in one of our cities, and she was barely 15 at that time. After that call, he packed his things and was gone in a few weeks. This was 2016 and I haven't seen or heard from him since then. They view my dad as a bad person for not giving him the amount of money he wanted and for asking him, a 30-year-old man with a thriving business, to move out. This is nothing in the grand scheme of things. There are more cases of entitlement in my family, and it's really baffling. Gosh. Sorry to hear, it doesn't sound like the family is grateful whatsoever. Hopefully your dad doesn't start feeling guilty, but watch them come crawling back when *T hits the fan and they need financial support. I am very surprised the dad hasn't said too much about this either. But I hope your dad also learns that someone's, even family, are selfish and bite the hands that feed them. You're completely right. Being too accessible breeds this kind of entitlement. I usually do not comment on Reddit, but I wanted to say that your dad sounds like a great man. You're very lucky to have him. Thank you so much. He really is a great guy. What a herd of stinking ingrates. Chris and his mother are just ungrateful leeches. When you have something that you didn't earn from the sweat of your brow, you become spoiled and arrogant. I realize that this is a cultural thing, but perhaps if your father hadn't been such a wonderful provider, the greed and ingratitude that is now being tossed in his face by a greedy ingrate might not have happened. Aside from this, I do not know what to say other than perhaps your father needs to say, "Here's what you're getting from me. Take it or leave it," and walk away. The entitlement and ingratitude isn't something I'd ever stand for now I'm older. Honestly, bless your father, what an absolute legend he is. Your aunt is off her rocker and no one should have to put up with that. He's a really great dad. My aunt hasn't gotten any better over the years. In case this story sounds familiar, I have posted this story previously on my previous account /thediala_, but that account was deleted, so I'm reposting again here. So if you've read this story before on this sub, then this is why. It isn't a stolen story. I'll be reposting the second Entitled Parents story from my former account tomorrow, and I'll be writing new entries and posting those as well in the coming week. So 6 stories in all. I just need a place to document everything. I need a place to get it all off my chest, as I'm sick of the ungratefulness and entitlement. I knew I had read this before. Thanks for letting me know that I'm not crazy. LOL. Your dad reminds me of my dad. He did a lot for his family too. Some of them were and probably still are ungrateful. Your father needs to stop helping them. It's mostly stopped now. Some people are truly awful sometimes. Not buying a handheld game for her kids after was told not. I received a gift card from work for a pop-up store. The store opens Thanksgiving week to the day after New Year's. I saw some handheld games for cheap with a 150 games built in, so I called several family members asking if it's a good gift for their children. All said yes except one aunt. She said it was too cheap for her kids and don't bother her about it because she's buying them the more expensive kind. Christmas came around, all the kids loved theirs. I even brought some for the adults in my family who has special needs. We have a device where we can engrave names on everyone's game. The aunt demanded why I didn't get a game for her kids. I reminded her of what she said. I was told I lied. I gave my phone to another family member and asked to read the text message she sent calling the game cheap. She was planning on buying her kids a better game system. She didn't buy her kids a game system because they are expensive. She demanded that we take the games from the adults with special needs because they're adults and don't need game. Her kids are shocked and telling their mother to clam down. She demanded why I didn't tell her it had that many games on it. I said no. We bought a round gift her kids. She left, but kids and husband wanted to stay. So when she left, I gave kids the same game like everyone else. The next day she called me upset because she had eaten sandwich and chips for Christmas dinner. My response: no one told to leave, you left on your own. Haven't had a problem with her since Christmas. I bet your Christmas dinner was a lot nicer without her sourness. You buying them the game anyway and pretending you didn't until she leaves in a huff was great. This belongs on petty revenge as well. Right? That was great. Ha ha. Auntie got what she deserved. Very generous gift, Soapy, good for you. She had only had a sandwich, sick, and it's clearly your fault. Why, what else could she have done after you proved she was the liar? That's just not polite when someone accuses you of lying. Why, I'm so offended on Auntie's part. I'm leaving this moment and you can all just miss me. And it will spoil your Redditing. Anyone? What's the matter? Did the door hit you in the arse on your way out? Sometimes, just sometimes, people learn from being taught a lesson like that. It's beautiful when it happens. They sound like good kids. I hope they become amazing adults just to spite their mother. Wait, so, you bought the kids, more than one, how many exactly, the game anyway? She should just not attend any so everyone can have a good holiday all the time. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.